Hi, everyone. Buenas noches. Thank you so much to La Casita. Gracias a Tere for that introduction, to Benny, to everybody that was a part of putting this exhibit and this event together. Es un placer estar con ustedes. Gracias por tenerme. And I can't wait to share some poems with you all tonight. As we honor our abuelas. I'm here honoring my abuela, Doña Teresa. I have a photo of her here, if you'll indulge me for a second, so you can see who I'm honoring with me tonight. This is Doña Teresa. And she'll be behind me this evening. I love how thoughtful this exhibit is put together, honoring all of our matriarchs, our abuelas. I love how dynamic the exhibit is in showing a broader representation of our abuelas and all the ways that they show up in our lives. This is about memory. This is about preserving our culture. This is about for many of us, our abuelas, our mothers, didn't have the educational opportunities that some of us have had. And so they didn't know how to read or write, but they had a literacy that was very important. And many of them were poets and painters and artists and dancers. And a lot of their stories are not just highlighted in the exhibit at La Casita, but also in Peggy Robles Alvarado's amazing anthology, The Abuela Stories, which I'm truly honored to be part of this event. It's very special to be with Peggy and all of you tonight. So I'm going to start off sharing some poems, but I want to start with an offering and an invitation. It's Latinx Heritage Month, and in the writing world, folks will sometimes say or tweet, "Oh boy, another abuela poem. Oh boy, we're gonna go with the abuelas again," or you know, and there's not enough. I'm here for the abuela poems every day. There's not enough abuela poems because our abuelas are dynamic and complicated and layered. And I think we actually need more of that layering and that complexity. These were not just strong and resilient women; they were complicated women. And like Tere said, these were women who were grief-filled or, were storytellers in their own right. And so I love that we're honoring all of that tonight. I want to start by invoking the words of Gloria Anzaldúa, who is like a literary abuela for me. Can we do that? Can we have literary abuelas? Yeah? So I would love to invoke this badass Chicana, lesbian, feminist, scholar, poet. She co-edited, of course, this bridge called My Back, a seminal anthology of feminist writing with Cherry Moraga. And Gloria Anzaldúa wrote an essay called Speaking in Tongues, which maybe some of you have read, and if you haven't, please do. I think it is a great companion essay to a lot of Audre Lorde's work as well. But in this essay, she's speaking to other third world women writers, other women of color. That's what she called, that's what they called each other back then in the 80s. And she asked a question in this anthology that I carry with me every day, that I return to, and I return to the question differently each time. And Gloria Anzaldúa asks, who gave us permission to perform the act of writing? And it's a radical question for those of us who have been relegated to the margins, for those of us who have inherited a tradition of silence, for those of us who've been told that we are better off being smaller versions of ourselves. Because another way to ask that question is, how dare we write? How dare we speak? How dare we think we have something to say, right? And how many of us have seen the look on our abuelas' faces or on our mothers' faces of knowing they have so much to say, but they have been made to feel like they're not worthy, or that their language or languages are not worthy of being shared, right? That they have to sort of shapeshift in some way. There's an inherent beauty in our abuelas and the way that they communicate. And so I would love to start with a poem that I wrote thinking about my abuelas, my tias, my mom, and the literary abuelas, including Gloria Anzaldúa. And I would love to invite everybody in this Zoom room to invite, like, if you haven't yet, invite your abuela into this space, right? Take a moment. If you want to write her name down on a piece of paper in front of you, if you want to just grab a photo, just bring her into this space. Or a literary abuela is okay, is welcome too. As I share this first poem, A Woman's Place. I think somebody's audio just came on. Okay, hopefully we can get that sorted. All right. I heard a woman becomes herself the first time she speaks without permission. Then every word out her mouth a riot. Say beautiful and point to the map of your body. Say brave and wear your skin like a gown or a suit. Say hero and cast yourself in the lead role. When a girl pronounces her own name, there is glory. When a woman tells her own story, she lives forever. All the women I know are perennials, marigolds, daffodils, soft things that refuse to die. I don't come from anything tamed or willing. I come from soil floss with barbed wire, meaning Abuela will cuss you out with the same breath she kissed you with. Her blood, a wild river. My mother doesn't rely on instruction manuals or men, nor does she equate the two. Can fix anything if you get out of her way, says the best technology, her own two hands. But once I dreamed I had no teeth, just a mouth to hold other people's things. If this poem is the only thing that survives me, tell them I grew a new tongue. Tell them I built me a throne. Tell them when we discovered life on another planet, it was a woman. And she built a bridge, not a border. Got God and named gravity after herself. Thank you. It would be really cool if at maybe a later time during the performance, if we could unmute everybody, because I would really love to hear you. Maybe just one time, because I'm seeing all of your beautiful faces. This next poem I wrote after I had the first time I took my mom back to the island after Hurricane Maria. And I was thinking a lot about the plane ride down. My mother was sitting in the aisle, and usually it was a very different trip for obvious reasons. And usually she sits in the window because she wants to look down, right, as the plane is sort of landing, right, that moment, right? But she didn't this time. And when I asked her why, she was crying, and she said, I can't look down because all I can think is my mother is buried there, and all that I saw were blue tents, right? And so I held her words in my body, and after shortly after her and I went down after Hurricane Maria, the protests happened, right? The summer of 2019, and I've been thinking a lot about being a writer from the diaspora, thinking about how my mother felt on that plane ride, and thinking about how I come from a people that were told we can't raise our flag, that have been discouraged from speaking our language. For many of us, children of Spanish-speaking parents, been discouraged, right, from speaking Spanish. And sometimes our parents have suffered consequences because they have been proud of their culture, and how colonialism is so violent, not only physically, economically, but to the psyche, right? And so this poem is called Dispatches from a Eureka, post Maria. And it begins with lyrics from Preciosa, which, as many of you know, is one of the unofficial anthems uh, of, uh, of Puerto Rico, a song written by Rafael Hernandez in the early 20th century, famously remixed by none other than Mark Anthony. And this is a song that was sung every night during the protests. And I was down there during summer 2019. Here we go. Preciosa, te llevo dentro, muy dentro de mi corazón. Y mientras más pasa tiempo, en ti se vuelca mi amor. Porque ahora es que comprendo, porque ahora es que comprendo que aunque pase lo que pase, yo seré puertorriqueño. Yo seré puertorriqueño. To find the esquina between left and right ear. To be valedictorian of misplaced accent marks and enyes, a fire hydrant under a fake palm tree, a Puerto Rican flag dripped in vapor rub. To greet a bodega cat posing as a doorman. The summer of 99, Big Pun dropped 100%. To be the Coquis' first chirp over an 808, 2 timbales and a microphone. To be salsa in an uprock, El Chacal rocking uptowns, the tick-tick of a gas stove turned clave, turned cool, to pass the last cuchifrito spot left in Hell's Kitchen. The vecinas perched on park benches off 10th Avenue. To be Nieca's daughter, ask si tu mamá está en casa. To understand more than you speak, to speak part jíbaro, part gringa, part deadass on everything I love, to yell Boricua with the wet island of your tongue. Hear it echo back at a 97 Toyota. To answer Titi Angie's call, the one from Guaynabo. To pass the phone to my mother, promise I'll learn more Spanish soon. To say my mother's country, but feel it in my bones. To press ear to streetlight and feel a ceiba grow. To hover hand over chest and hear the hum of that precious island. To visit PR every summer until we stopped. To read poems in English like this one about my Tío Mingo who can't read them. To be a dead-end dial tone the night Hurricane Maria tore a straight line through my mother's country, my beloved C-section split, splintered slit. To not know about Titi Angie, the chickens, Tío Mingo in Castañer, or if Abuela's tomb was caught in the lattice cemetery landslide. To find my mother praying in 2 languages, in case God is bilingual. To be the night I prayed to Papa Dios. The last utterance before Abuela sang her good bones into the dirt, before I realized she wasn't making a fist, but clutching a rosary, preserving a beautiful thing inside a beautiful thing. And what could be more preciosa than that? Thank you. So growing up, my mom would take us to, like many of you, took us to PR, to where she grew up almost every summer. And my mom was born in a very small town entre Adjuntas y Lares called Castañer. And I have some really vivid memories of my time visiting my abuela, my abuelo. And one of the memories I had held in my body, I didn't know what it was doing there until I wrote this poem. I remember my abuela was getting ready to make dinner, and I looked up. I might have been 7, maybe 8, and I saw her running to chase the chicken to kill it for dinner. Something very traditional, but it was the first time I had seen it. And I was startled, to say the least. Of course, very normal, very traditional on the island, but it was a moment of diasporicness where I was like, I was not born here. Like, I am of the diaspora. um, and what I think I have been reflecting on, and in the writing of this poem, um, was how I come from women who feel too much to feel too much. These are not women who sit down and have heart to hearts with you. These are not women who uh, who communicate sometimes in a direct way. They show you. They communicate by showing you, right? These are women who raised me hard, and I think in a way to prepare me for a world that maybe wouldn't love me back. Um, these are women who were not just resilient, but I think it's important to honor and name the trauma that they had also experienced. And so this poem is about tracing a lineage of grief in the women that I come from, women who feel too much to feel too much. This is called Doña Teresa and the Chicken. The wooden house in Castañer didn't come with air conditioner or anything cool. The heat was its own kind of music, and so was Abuela, demanding, sharp-tongued. The kind of woman, I imagine, whose teeth grew in because she told them to. So the chicken never had a chance. It ran around the backyard, flapping its black feathered wings for mercy, for God's attention. But Papa Dios knew better than to get in between a woman feeding her grandkids. I looked over my shoulder, and there she was chasing him. Like an old lover, she came back to haunt, yelling, Hijo de sinvergüenza, ven acá. Her rosary beads slapped against her chest over and over like a chant, and you knew everything in her path was temporary. Even the wind buckled at the knees at the sight of a woman too wise to act like her blood was softer than it was. And I saw her do it, and I think she knew, because the chicken clucked so hard, it spit up its own good throat. And she laughed, grabbed it by the neck, swung it high above her head like a propeller. Once, she gutted Mom's favorite pig with a machete and fed it to her on her 12th birthday. And maybe that's how Mama learned to love us, to kill the thing that feeds you. Years later, she didn't go to her best friend's funeral, or the vecina who mothered her in New York, barely made it through Abuelas. I suppose all she had was to love until death and no more. So when we saw Doña Teresa lying in the casket, arms crossed, chin cocked up, the whole family cried and clawed, wanting her to come back, wanting her to shout, didn't I prepare you better than this? Thank you. This next poem, I think of my abuela, even though it's not a poem that is directly invoking her. But I think when I think about what my abuela might have been literally or figuratively chasing, I think about what parts of womanhood I was or wasn't chasing, what parts of girlhood that I inherited did I keep and did I not keep. Tere had talked about um, sewing in factories. My mom worked in a factory. Both my mom and my abuela sewed a lot. And yet I never wanted to wear a dress. I always hated wearing dresses. And so this poem is part of a series of basketball sonnets that I've been working on that obviously have nothing to do with basketball. But I played in Puerto Rico after college. I was a scholarship athlete. And my abuela came to my senior game. And so I thought maybe this would be a poem to share tonight as I think about what I inherited and what my perception of beauty was, what my perception of what being a girl meant. and how that was filtered through my abuela's eyes and through my mother's eyes, and how I rejected some of that as I stepped into my own skin. This is called Lady Jordan. It didn't matter that I married the game or slept with a ball under my arm. Mom said girls don't hoop, they wear hoops. And around here, vecinas chirped, it's always y tu novio season. But beauty is a finger roll, a backdoor cut on the blacktop, a fadeaway jump shot, 2 seconds left on the clock. So what mattered was Danny talking smack, even though his teeth were out of order. This isn't the only history, but is the history of everything. The neighborhood boys who shot crooked never learned my name. So I played them 21, turned their ankles to jello, made their backs kiss the floor until they donned me, Lady Jordan. And who wouldn't take that? Though I've never been ladylike, I wore that rusted metal rim like a ring and slipped my bones through the net like a perfect white dress. Thank you. I have 2 more poems to share with you all. Thank you for being here and listening. I feel your energy through this screen, so I really appreciate that. This is one of the first poems I wrote about my abuela. I have not read this poem in a very long time, but I'm so glad that I can read it tonight, because one of the reasons that I came to poetry, or maybe poetry came to me, was because I was really trying to reclaim and explore my cultural identity on my own terms, if that makes sense. I was really trying to reject notions of assimilation that says all kinds of things, including there are too many abuela poems, right? And so my abuela moved in with me and my mom the last 5 years of her life. And so while we had this sort of distant relationship of distance, right? Me just sort of going down during the summers when I was a kid, she moved in with us for 5 years, and I lived with her when she was 93 until when she passed at 98. And my abuela had Alzheimer's. I know that I'm sure some of you in this event might also resonate with that experience as well, which is a very emotional experience, directly relating to one's memory. And my abuela and I grew very, very close during those years. And I wrote this poem to celebrate and honor her memory. And I wrote this a year before she passed. So she heard this poem. This is called Abuela's Dance. I creep into your room, Abuela, like an 8-year-old on Christmas morning, up 3 hours too early. But it's 1 p.m. and you are still sleeping. I decide to wake you. Call me selfish, but there's something left in you I need to hold on to before you're gone. As your eyes open, I'll wait, your face, trying to make sense of mine, trying to translate me into something you've spoken before. And I know it only takes about 22 seconds, but I swear it's long enough for me to have fallen in love again. Abuela, yo soy tu nieta, recuerda. And there, your eyes widen like football fields as you reach for me in your back pocket like a crumpled dollar bill you forgot you had, showing me I've always been worth holding on to. After we exchange short Spanish greetings, I try to keep the conversation going, but I'm not fluent. This language, your language, was always a bumpy road. So I turn the radio on to fill the potholes in my tongue and we dance. Let cellular crews lay the clues that stitch you back to me, the lyrics pulling themselves over the gaps in your seams like a jacket covering the puddles of your memory lapses, synapses snapping. And though your mind is a retired dancer with 2 left feet, your spirit, a 22-year-old woman with legs that could wrap Christmas presents for days and hips that could make God want a tap dance. Every chorus, a question I ask, like, Abuela, how did you feel when it was illegal to wave your own flag? Every melody, a moment to capture your history, like, Abuela, did you really walk to school 3 miles every day and back? Every riff, a chance to end those sleepless nights once and for all. Abuela, did you ever figure out how to stay in love? I promise I won't tell a soul I know. See, when we dance, we make corpses wanna boogie. You in bed moving your arms, conducting the skeleton of my body like a symphony. My hips rocking back and forth with a dip and a twist, kissing the accents in your favorite song's lips, reaching for the dimples in your memory for me to take a picture with. See, I can make you feel like when you were 22, growing up in a Puerto Rican town, too high up to place on the map. Abuela, do you remember you yet? And I know this just amuses you, but the truth is this was never just dancing. You represent a part of me people said I could never claim. You give me the language to speak my identity fluently for the first time. This was never just dancing. And maybe it's because I'm the only one that can get to you. That 22-year-old in you, the joy, the smile that forgets to show itself on most days. Abuela, you make me feel useful. You make me feel like I come from someplace. So who needs a map when I got you? So go ahead, Abuela, and sleep, just not forever. Because you and I have a lot more dancing left to do.